Hey guys, so as requested, I'm going to do a little brief overview of my process in making a very simple brush-up silicone mold on my sculpture of Zorya or Zorza. First thing I did was put her on her back. Putting your sculptures on their back is a good way to make sure that you don't catch a lot of air bubbles in the nostrils and other corners of the eyes and areas like that. So here I'm using some water-based clay just to create a little bit of a retaining wall, a dam. It's just to catch the runoff of the silicone rubber when I'm working so it doesn't, run down onto the floor or whatever, and kind of keeps it where it needs to be. I'm just smoothing all that out with some hand tools now. A little bit of makeup sponge action after, just make sure that everything's kind of neat and tidy. And then you'll see me here vaselining the wood, just with a little brush. And that's just because even though silicone doesn't really stick to much of anything except for itself, it can get bound up on certain surfaces. So you always want to be careful and use some release agent. I'm using silicone called Dragon Skin FX Pro. I just like it. It's very quick and it has a kind of sticky property that makes the metal powder that I use stick to it very, very well. So it's just convenient for me. There's tons of silicones you can use. Here I mixed in some pigment just so I can kind of track where it's going, and this is a layer just with no thickener added. It's just straight up, just so that it can run into all the detail you need. You got to make sure that you try to evenly coat everything as best as possible. You see me hair dry the surface there. Silicone, especially platinum silicone, reacts a lot with heat, so it was a little cold in the studio. A little bit of hair dry action kind of speeds it up just a little bit. Here I am going in with another layer. So these first two layers, you got to be really careful about ensuring that they're fully cured before you go ahead with the next one. But as it goes along, you don't have to be quite as careful. So I always double up my print coat, my detail coat. Now I'm going in with a little bit of thickener. I'm using a product called Thivex. It's just a little thixotropic agent. You just add a few drops and it kind of changes the consistency of the silicone, kind of like magic. And this one's I didn't put too much thickener in this first layer just because I'm still trying to capture all the detail. And each kind of subsequent layer has a little more thickener than the last. So a lot of people ask how many layers does it take to make a silicone mold, but it's really more dependent on the thickness. You're trying to create at least like a 1/4 inch thickness over your piece. Anything more than that starts getting into wasted material unless there's something in the sculpture that requires you to use more. Here I'm just troweling on some thickened silicone now, so this is where you kind of shape your mold and try to create the thickness where you need it. The silicone's quite translucent, so you still see a lot of the sculpture underneath it, but I'm going in with this trowel and just pushing everything around. And here I believe this is the last layer, and I added quite a lot of pigment kind of by accident. It kind of screwed up, but anyway, I went in and kind of troweled it on everywhere else, making sure that I have everything as thick as I need it. This mold was reasonably thin, but it's more than enough for what I needed to do. So here I'm just troweling it on all the undersides and making sure everything is nice and even. And then I spritz my hand with some isopropanol or alcohol, and alcohol allows your hand to kind of glide over the silicone and smooth everything out. You want to make sure that you smooth your silicone out so it doesn't get like kind of bumpy and lumpy in your mother mold later. Those tabs that you see are actually keys, and they will locate into the mother mold when I make it, and you'll see that in a second. Here I'm just trimming everything up, neatening everything up, just any of that overflow. I'll trim the mold up later when it's done too, but just a little preliminary. I'm also cutting the keys down a little bit because they're just a little excessive. They don't have to be very tall. And then a little more Vaseline around the wood again, just to make sure I don't stick my mother mold to it. Here I'm using a product called Freeform Air for my mother mold. And it may not be the most durable choice, but it is a very convenient one for me. It is a really convenient, awesome material. It's like an epoxy putty on steroids. You just mix up these big balls of material and you can just kind of push it around very economically. And so you can use many materials for a mother mold, including fiberglass or plaster or any of these things. But this is just something I had lying around, and I do really like using it for a lot of my projects. So here I'm just mixing it up, making sure I connect all the pieces. You're always trying to overlap layers a little bit so that you make sure that you have everything bonded well to itself. And you gotta be pretty thorough about pushing it into all the undercuts and everything else. You don't want to have any gaps between your silicone and your mother mold. And here I'm just gonna spritz it with some more alcohol again and smooth everything out. Yeah, make it nice and neat and tidy, at least somewhat neat and tidy. And this is the next day. The mold is cured. I'm just going to pop off the mother mold, little screwdriver, nice and careful, making sure I don't break nothing, and then peel the silicone off, and that's it. Thanks for watching, guys.